Hey cousins, welcome to Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Welcome, cousins, to this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. I'm your host, Cornell Wright, the People's Lobbyist. Today, let's talk about misinformation, disinformation, and how much it might cause you when you're wrong. So, cousins, I want to welcome a guest today. This is Glenn Clark, a good friend of mine. I've known him for a number of years. So many years we're not going to talk about it, but let's say we've known each other for a while since we were old enough to drink. Let's put it that way. And so, Glenn, thank you for joining us today, and welcome on Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Thank you so much, Cornell. Glad to be here.
So, cousins, today we're going to talk about something that's kind of been happening for a period of time. I've talked about in the past, and one of the things that my good buddy Glenn brings to the conversation is that not only is he an attorney, but he had time being a journalist writing for a newspaper. And so he can speak to both sides, if you will, some like legality and perhaps journalistic aspect of these things going forward. And so here at Baobab Tree Studios, we are located in Connecticut. And 10 years ago, December 14th to be exact, there was the Newtown massacre at Sandy Hook. And ladies and gentlemen, in case you hadn't been noticing, that had been kind of murmuring underneath the informational cloud for a while, but it reared its head the last couple of weeks in regards to a case against Alex Jones, I don't know, what do you want to call Alex Jones? Whatever. A popular person he was, in fact is. So one of the questions that we have to want to talk about today is misinformation and disinformation. And I think the case against Alex Jones is one of the great examples of that we're getting far too much of that, which is now putting us to the sides as opposed to bringing us together. So Glenn, if I may ask you, from your perspective, when you start looking at the information and disinformation that's out there, where do you think some of the fault lies or what some of the issues are that we're confronting with this? You know, just to get us started with the conversation on Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Cornell, that's a difficult question, man. You thought you put it out there like it's an easy question or an easy answer. But this is what's happened in America. The media has generated certain narratives about what good is and what's not good. Now, there's a whole bunch of folks, I just say a whole bunch of folks, who don't agree with that narrative. And therefore, they start reaching and grasping at anything that would support their own individual thought about what good and bad is. And
Right.
then we have a government, which was never perfect to begin with.
That's true.
It's got its former president and other people who have tremendous power and authority, and they support this concept that what did they say when he was elected? Alternate facts. What are you talking about?
Right.
A fact is just a fact.
Right.
Now we can disagree by presenting evidence in a trial, different facts, different perspectives on the facts, then have a legal argument about it. Let the judge decide it. That's not happening. So many people who only have one point of view, they buy into the misinformation, disinformation, and they don't look at any other source for information. So anything that I see on Facebook or anything I see, I look it up.
Right.
I want to know who sent that.
I do the same thing, cousin. In regards to the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, which just talked about business, I go and find another source. But say, do I want to invest in that stock, or do I want to believe what that person says? Let's go see if somebody else has also talked about that in a different way, and not necessarily leaning in the same directions. Maybe a contrary position is worthwhile.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up your time. I was talking to a friend of mine some months ago, and he was telling me about how dangerous it is for police officers to do their job. Okay? So I decided to go look at the federal stats on how many police officers are getting hurt.
Okay.
How many police officers are getting shot.
Good
maybe
question.
There was, don't hold me to the numbers, I don't have it here in front of me, maybe 125 officers are killed.
For the year.
In the year.
Right.
And it wasn't last year, it was maybe 2018.
Okay, that's a bad number, but
That's a
anyway.
bad number. There
Yep.
should be none. I support the
Me too.
police.
Yeah.
There should be a bad number. I tell police all the time, go arrest somebody so I have some more clients. I tell them that all the time. Don't sit here at the diner. Go arrest
Right,
somebody.
right, right,
Right?
right,
But
right.
the thing is, 40, I remember the number 40 of those officers died in high-speed chases.
Wasn't that being questioned in a number of places? They made that not appropriate anymore for high
It's
speed
not
chases
appropriate
of
in some
people.
communities. In some communities, you can do what you want to do, whatever you want to do it. So
Oh,
all
okay.
I'm saying is, so there's a misinformation about how dangerous it is. Firefighters, traditionally firefighters have a more dangerous job than the police do.
Right, right. I understood. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
very much so. hmm So here in Connecticut, of course, as you might imagine, there was this whole discussion, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the show, regarding the Sandy Hook massacre,
Mhm.
and about how there was an outpouring on pretty much the part of everyone. It was a terrible thing that happened to the teachers and children to Sandy Hook School, and we took it very much to heart. And then this guy, Alex Jones, decided that he wanted to be an extreme contrarian and said that it actually didn't exist,
Mhm.
which caused at least my hair to go on fire, and I'm sure a number of other persons, and so much so that one of the best legal firms in the state actually took them as a pro bono client, not
Mhm.
only to pursue the gun manufacturer, which they had a successful case, I might add, but also in regards to pursuing Alex Jones, which we saw either last week or the week and a half ago, to actually get a judgment against him, just because of the inflammatory information and wrong, pure wrong. And so I would offer to cousins that if you had been listening to this man, I would suggest that you consider not doing that anymore. Because if something as significant as kids getting killed is something that he doesn't have the sensitivity to understand and recognize, you might want to consider that as a source, okay? Because if he's going to go on that one, what else might he be incorrect on? But but the other piece is, when you start looking at this whole thing, is that he made a position, and then even after he was aware that the position was that the gun manufacturer had been sued and in fact been found guilty, he maintained his position.
Mhm.
I mean, if you were his attorney, would you continue to support that position in light of, hey, something that hadn't happened before, a gun manufacturer being sued successfully for being at fault in some way for, buddy, I'm I'm not
Well,
sure that was wise.
this goes back to I would like to think most attorneys are reasonably intelligent,
Mhm.
but there's some crazy ones out there too. But
Mm.
I mean, who would take such a case? I mean, that's kind of bizarre, you know. But if he gets sued, he does need a defense, and if he can pay the retainer, you defend him.
Code of the Wind.
Maybe that's an oversimplification. As long as you can pay the retainer, you got to defend him the best you
Right.
can.
So I think, cousins, what Attorney Clark just said is that you can almost get within reason. You can find someone to defend you if you have enough money.
You
And,
have.
and certainly he has a lot of money, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of cousins have been supporting him for a lot of ways in all of his different positions he's taken across the board. In fact, I believe he was even a part of the January 6th, activity in some manner. I think there's been information showing he was there. And so, but think about this, cousins. Think about, if we're on this show talking about we're the people, and we're trying to come up with ideas and concepts to bring us closer together so we can strengthen the United States to move forward as we should, being the world leaders, not to separate us and make us more weak, right? The
Yeah.
whole idea is that you separate the pieces, you become weaker, then you bring it together, make it stronger. So here's a person who's advocating a position which was not only wrong from the beginning, okay, and in fact, if he has enough money that he could have come to Connecticut in order to go through and look at the school.
Yeah, but he didn't want to do that. See, he wanted to go with the narrative. There's certain people, Cornell, that don't believe that there was actually slavery in America. You know that, right? They don't
Mm,
believe that. There's certain people don't believe in the Holocaust. They don't
mm.
believe that the Japanese were interred in the United States of America, hauled
And
off.
they had soldiers who also participated and fought for the United States in World War
Yeah,
II. Right. Well, as my grandmother used to say, some people don't believe fat meat is greasy,
right.
and that's
And
just
and
a great
and and
example.
then certain leaders encourage them to hold these contrarian views. They buy right into it.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
They go right with it. A lot of it has to do, I don't want to make excuses for people, but sometimes they're just afraid. You see, when people in the Midwest and all over this country start losing their jobs, they got to find somebody to blame because they were supposed to have the American way.
And unfortunately, they're not looking at the right people to make the decisions and say, hey, you and I did not take someone's job.
Right.
Someone in a corporate position made the decision that there's a better market or a better place to manufacture this product than in your town.
Right.
And as a result, we're going to take it out of your town, move it somewhere else for either some tax benefit that we receive that, by the way, we may have helped to influence. Cousins, think about that. We may have helped influence that tax benefit to move it somewhere else. And then, by the way, thank you very much for having been supportive of us, but we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So you're wondering, so why is your manufacturing facility, why is your distribution facility no longer there? And your school system starts to be impacted and a whole bunch of other things.
Right. So when you go to,
it's not simple as we may look at.
No, it's not straight. It's not straightforward. It's kind of tricky. But this guy Jones. So this is what happens. See, people will do anything for money. And if there's some guys out there who will buy ads for his program because he takes these non-popular views, not backed up by any facts,
not substantial, maybe even not the truth, shall we say? Let's say it's not the truth, Cousins.
There's no truth anymore. You see, according to some people, there is no truth. See, the election returned, the outcome of the election is not true. It was stolen.
Well, we talked about that on the show, and it's not right.
Right. And all the judges and stuff say, oh, the numbers don't add up. The numbers do add up.
Over 60 court cases, all of them refused.
And so now people still, I can't believe, and quote unquote intelligent people are still saying the election was stolen.
Yes, even the judge cases even went to the Supreme Court, and they were all struck down, which is basically saying there was like no legal support for their being. And then, by the way, just to fall back into it, Cousins, if you look at the January 6th hearings, you can go back and look that up online. They had people indicate, and everybody within the Trump administration said no, that he had lost the election both on the popular vote and on the electoral vote. But then one man continued to say, no, I didn't, and that then perpetuated what we now refer to as the big lie.
Correct. And so we just keep going. So that's what happened. So people like Alex Jones and other people, there are others around the country, other politicians, they still stoke the flame so that they can personally benefit. If former President Trump wants to endorse them, if people in the community where they live, in some parts of, in Pennsylvania where we live, let me tell you something. Thank God for Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Allentown. Because if you look at the map, all the west about there is like red. Red.
But see, Cousins, so as you look at this whole thing, what we're trying to do here in this program is bring us together. You only can come together when you can all start to look at the same number of facts and then describe and appreciate the facts. The whole story goes like, if you had 5 different people and they touched the elephant in 5 different locations, they described the elephant differently. If someone was on the tail, someone was on the nose, the trunk, someone was on the tusk, someone on the legs, etc., they describe it differently. But at least they'd still be working with the same elephant.
Right.
Cousins, we got people who are, I'm talking about us getting to hold our hands on the elephant of truth. And people over here are talking about, oh, we're not even in the same zoo.
Yeah, we're saying that's not an elephant.
That's not an elephant. Okay?
That's a giraffe.
Come on, Cousins. How are we ever going to be able to come together, in order to fix together our mutual problems? Because let's be honest, some of our problems are in fact mutual. No matter where you are in the country now, if you're having environmental issues because of drought or water shortages, that's the same thing, fires or flooding. Think about this. Part of the country is in flooding. Other parts of the country can't get enough water. And other parts of the country are on fire. Okay. And we can't agree that maybe we're part of the problem of that. Yeah, Cousins, come on. We now have a president who's been a former president who's talking about how he still won the election. And we have over, I believe, count was over 200 endorsed candidates across the country coming up for the mid-season elections who are subscribing to the fact that he, in fact, still was lost the election, did not lose the election, rather. He still would have been right if he had won. Now, cousins, we talked about that in an episode a couple of weeks ago, in which is real simple. That's the same thing as someone coming to you now and believing that the world is flat. And do you want to vote for someone who believes the world is flat, who has responsibility for making good decisions from a governmental perspective on behalf of you and your families? Cousins, come on, no.
Mm-hmm.
And what Glenn and I are talking about now is that informational context of being important where you get your information.
Right. And, I hate to say it, well, we're running around talking about how we are so different from each other, which we are, in fact, not.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be worrying about how we can educate our children. I was just reading an article this morning in the news feed. Our kids are not up to snuff in reading.
Mm-hmm.
Other countries are way ahead of the United States in reading comprehension. So they're real issues. See, those are the issues that could draw us together and help us to work for a common goal. However, too many of people in America who believe that they are either middle class or going to be middle class, they missed the boat. They missed the boat.
Okay.
You're just you're not part of the deal. You're in the same deal I got. You got the same deal I got. I got to figure out how to pay for my baby's education. I got to figure out how to do that. I don't have generational wealth that I can tap into to buy my daughters, who work very hard, new houses.
Right.
And most Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, that ain't you.
Far too many. And then just to tie into that point is that let's go back to our news feeds, cousins. The news feeds that we're getting, for most part, are not addressing those real life issues and problems that we need to deal with.
Right.
They're giving us sensationalism and things that aren't the things that have to do with importance. And in fact, I promise on a very soon show, we'll talk about the educational components. I talked about this in the past, but we'll talk about it again because it's coming up again. It's going to be a new school year coming up. And I heard this report today, just to tease us about this, that on the average in some school district, I forget where it was, teachers spend $750 a year of their own money to support and buy supplies for their kids for their classrooms. And they're still saying that's not enough. Right. And we all know, in the case if you don't know, school teachers don't make enough money. And in fact, a couple of years ago, you get me on a trail here. One of the legislators in a Republican state actually said that education was a political issue, that Republicans have one position on education and Democrats have another. Cousins, let me tell you, as Glenn Clark just said, if anything needs to bring us together, it's our collective education on the part of all of us in the United States of America. And it goes back to the information that we as adults get, right, from our news sources and who we believe and who we don't. And this is a great example. This Alex Jones thing is like, no, cousins, that's wrong. No, he's wrong on that. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what else is he wrong? And as Glenn and I, we both enjoy football. So, man, tell me, if you had a quarterback that made the wrong call on a play, how many times are you going to keep him in to make that wrong call?
Well, I don't know. So you got to give him a chance to figure it out. But, who was the coach who said after the guy threw like 4 interceptions, he says, well, he's not going to throw 5. They said, well, how did you know he wasn't going to throw 5? Because he's going to be standing next to me. That's why he's not throwing 5, right?
So, cousins, on that note, you think about your information sources and think about how accurate your information sources have been all across the board. You can start keeping a check mark, next to your seat at home. Is this correct? Is this correct? Is this correct? And if they come up with even less than 4, I would submit to you, they come up with 3 bad calls, don't go to that news feed or that information anymore because they're not working with you. But based upon that, you can stay with us here on Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas because we're trying to bring you the facts because we want to bring you together. Okay. You have any closing comments, my man?
No, man, that's a great concept. But we got to have there's got to be something that happens in America that unifies Americans. And there are too many divisive people, institutions who are out there who don't want that to happen.
Right.
And when it does happen, a lot of people are going to be very unhappy. When I say that, I had a whole bunch of politicians and business leaders and all that. They're going to be very unhappy about that because we're going to have problems.
So thank you, cousins, for joining us on this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. My thanks to Glenn, attorney Glenn Clark, good cousin. And we're trying to bring us together, cousins, not separate us. And so to that point, if you have any comments or ideas about this show, please put them in the bottom. We'll get back to you on that. And it might even influence a new episode on Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. You take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, Glenn.
Anytime, my friend.
We are the people. We are the people.
Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas is intended for the participation of responsible adults of legal drinking age who wish to engage in substantive virtual discussions and social drinking for entertainment purposes only. Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas does not advocate the abuse of alcoholic beverages. Choosing to participate in any of the drinking activities shared in the program should be made with moderation and caution and is the sole responsibility of the user.